The wonderful GenG have blessed us with their comms, which is something that I don't normally get a chance to analyze. I've been critiqued by some pros that I don't analyze the gameplay thinking about comms. It's because ultimately you can never know. But one of the beautiful things about GenG's recent performance is we can attribute a lot of their success to their amazing comms. Now, they put out the full comms. I think they might have muted some bits and bobs. I don't know exactly. Did sound like Illusion wasn't talking a huge amount, so maybe they muted Illusion at times. But what I do want to do is I want to go through the comms, and I want to give you guys an insight into what makes it good comms. Maybe there's some things I need to improve on, and some of the key things I listened out to that you guys can learn from at home or if you're in a pro team yourself. So we'll start things off.
Let's fucking go! Let's go! Come on, let's go!
Typically, I don't swear on my stream and my YouTube. There will be swearing this.
Let's go.
I'm back, right?
Okay, so you can feel... So first thing you can feel is the energy, right? So this is something that is really important, especially on LAN, to have good energy. That increased hype will allow you to focus more. There is a sweet spot where too much hype will make you make bad decisions, but you know, these guys have learned that this is their sweet spot of hype, especially for Jack and Nolly, where they've been through multiple LANs. You know, they've experienced where their sweet spot is. I know Nolly plays a lot better under high energy, and it seems like Jack has learnt that recently, because Dignitas tried to be super calm and zen, which didn't necessarily work, especially when things start going wrong.
Take my jet. Yeah, back left. Go back left. Nice, go again, Jack. Just Astro. Nice.
Okay, first things first, you might be thinking, oh my god, this is so much information, which it is a lot of information. This is some of the most comms I've heard in a pro team. But you've got to remember that we're listening to the recording of 3 voices. For each of these players, they're only listening to 2 voices and they're speaking themselves. So they only hear about 1/3, well, 2/3 of what you're hearing. So it's a bit different in that sense, because different parts of your brain are processing those bits of information. They're not processing their spoken word in the same way they're processing the things they're hearing. So it's a bit different. Just so you guys are aware, that's the first comment everyone said about this is, oh my god, it's so hectic.
Pre-shot.
Yeah.
One up.
Yeah, I got you. Shot Jack. Nice shot, I'm on the back.
Yes.
I'm behind.
So what you'll notice is, firstly, Chronic is less experienced at the higher level. So you'll notice how he tends to have more of a tendency to repeat comms, which is, of course, inefficient, but it does indicate the importance of a comic. Sort of like, you know, like when you spam, I got it in team chat. If you say it once, it gets beaten by someone spamming it 3 times. It's that same mindset here. That will be a little bit of nerves. That'll be a little bit of young getting used to communicating at this level and so on and so on. It tends to be less experienced people will over communicate at times. But generally, they're trying to communicate once and only once. And then if they really need to come across, they'll communicate it multiple times.
I'm gonna go chat. I'll down.
So one of the things you'll notice is they'll give their teammates added information at interactions. It will give their teammates the advantage when going in. So there you heard can't, which is a great call to let your teammates know that you're not going to be interacting with the ball. So it means that they can react as if the opponent's going to hit it cleanly, which right here happens. And they'll also be telling each other where they are off the ball. And this helps them to make decisions based off of how they're going to pass the ball.
Ashron. Nice. Go again. I'm not nice. Right.
So you heard the right call there. This is something you're going to hear a lot of, is calling out positions for passes. Generally, it's like a call and response when you hear people call that stuff. Is if I say right and you say right, that means we're gonna do that. If I say right and you don't respond, or it doesn't look like you're gonna do it, then it's essentially me offering up my positioning. It's not a guaranteed thing. So right there, Jack didn't pass right after Chronic said right. So you hear boost amounts is really key in comms. Firstly, boost amounts allows your team to know how much boost you're on, especially if it's going for 100 when you're on 0. It also is a positional comm, so it's one of the best comms you can do in Rocket League. If you call out a boost position, left mid, right mid, back left, top left, whatever it is, however you want to call it, you've said 2 words and you've given your teammate boost information and location at the same time. So it gives a lot of value when you call out those positions.
Yeah.
Coverage.
I'm behind you. Yes, I'll
Another great bit of communication you can hear here. There's so much to break down here because they're communicating super well and there's lots of bits of information. You can hear, I'm behind you. Now, I'm behind you is one of the most powerful things you can communicate in Rocket League, because when you're going for the ball, the scariest prospect is if you get beaten, because sometimes you do. But if you go for the ball knowing that if you're beaten, there's someone covering for you, then you're going to be way more confident going for it and much more likely to be successful. So you see here, Chronic goes to that knowing that Joyo can beat him, and then Nolly's able to get it anyway. So this is beautiful combination between Nolly and Chronic there, where Nolly's called, I'm behind you, Chronic's able to go for it.
Nice. Astral, last. Free shot.
Go again.
Yeah. Open.
No, he's there. I got it.
So you hear they call free shot, they call he's messed up, all that kind of stuff to give a teammate the indication to change a decision. And the way the tone of their voice indicates how important it is. You heard there with Chronic, he raised his voice in a way that made it very clear to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Oh, can't.
I'll leave.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm back. I'll copy you. I gotta leave.
Yeah.
Take a left mid. I missed a bit. Yeah, dude, that's what up.
Whatever.
I have.
I'm slide back, very slide back.
I'm low. Alright, I'm
going back, right?
Yeah, you
My
touch.
pads.
Bottom.
So we heard amongst all that there, a few little bits of information that were quite key. Giving information when things didn't happen. So I think Jack missed the boost, so he let his teammate know. Made it very clear to Chronic that it was likely to be beaten above, and then Chronic got it. We also heard a nice in there, which is a bit of a meme in Rocket League that people say nice a lot of the time. Now, nice is kind of like an emotive comm. You don't have a huge amount of time when communicating in Rocket League to be able to be emotive because information is so fast, you need to get it out. But nice almost, it keeps the flow going, it keeps everyone happy, but it also just sort of ends a chapter a little bit. You know, like it ends a phase of play and resets your mind for the next play. So like right here, we hit... So Nolly's taken left mid, we know that. Jack missed the boost, we know that. Chronic got it. Jack's going to go up here. Over me, calls that. Chronic says, I have. Chronic gets it. You hear the nice, reset. Let's go into the next phase, right? So it sort of puts a full stop on the end of that phase of play and then gets them onto the next thing. It also is going to make Chronic feel a bit better, you know, all that kind of stuff.
I'm slide back, right?
Yeah, you touch. Bottom. I gotta wait.
You get backwards. You 30 in that.
Yeah, I'll
Nice.
take him back left.
Yo.
Okay,
I got.
Yeah, you got a 50.
One touch over.
Yeah, what on?
Yes. I'll leave.
I got
Mid, right?
Can't
try it.
Watch out.
I'm not
Yeah,
So it does feel pretty chaotic at these points, but you can hear there's lots of really important information, like letting each other know where to structure around each other, like telling each other to go backboard or what, saying that they're leaving it or can't go for it makes it very clear that they're not going to go. So I think people overestimate how important I got it is as a call. Like I got it is a great call. It sort of solidifies a decision in a situation where you know someone's going for it, and it's part of every team's communication. But actually one of the most important things people should be thinking about integrating into their comms is when you can't get it. Because calling, you can't get it, faking, forcing, over me, those kind of things, it gives your teammates way more information than something like I got it would. And it can actually give you an advantage which the opponents aren't aware of. Because from your opponent's point of view, it looks like you're going to go for it. From your teammates' point of view, they know you're never going to go for it. So it gives your team an advantage over your opponents.
Can't shoot. Yeah, you jump.
I got again.
Yeah, leave a few.
50.
Guys, I'm on. Yes, I'm ready. I'm over the marker. You tell me. Yeah, I know it is. It's all good.
Now, this is where comms are really important, is can you maintain comms throughout a whole game? This is where psychology comes into it. I can tell you now, amongst most teams, if you jumped ahead to this point here or this point here, it would potentially sound different at different times. I've done that with these guys, and I thought they were slowing down their comms as they settled down into a series. Actually, it was just that my brain was able to process the comms speed a lot better as I listened to it for longer. But if we just listen to the rhythm of the comms...
Free shot, I'll be mid.
Nice double.
I have to wait.
So listen to the rhythm.
SunnyBreez, can't go.
Okay, you hear the rhythm of the comms? If we go forward to here...
Yeah, I'll double.
Take time.
I'm going for this. Okay, I have 0-0. No, I'll leave. Yeah, I got the bit. Yeah, just challenge us.
So they keep that same speed throughout the whole series, which is key because if it starts to dip, the players will feel that and they'll lose their motivation. They'll start to feel lethargic and so on and so on. If it goes too fast, it will start to feel chaotic. But to be able to keep that same speed throughout a series, even when you concede, even when you score, is so important. And that's the same for every part of any competitive game or sport or whatever. You want to have what you consider the optimum level and try and hit that as often as possible. I want to know what these guys are like in scrims, because if their scrims comms are close to tournament comms, then that's also an amazing factor. There's a lot of teams that their scrim comms will be a lot slower, There might even be a player who doesn't come as much in scrims, and then when they go into a tournament, they step it up and change. And that's a whole new thing you've got to experience. Obviously, there's an element of stepping up in a tournament where you feel that energy go up, but you should at least be aware of what optimum comms feels like in practice and try and replicate it. So let's just listen to what they say between the game.
No worries. Let's try to the floor.
Time out or no? Time out or no?
Oh, I dropped 96. No, I don't. I think we're good. I'm fine. I'm not nervous.
Okay.
So you can hear Chronic saying, "I'm not nervous," which, you know, is a classic, like, people say that when they are nervous. I think he probably wasn't sure what nervous feels like. Maybe he'd spoken to the team beforehand about feeling nervous and how it affected his gameplay and so on. Maybe that after that game, he got it out of his system and so on.
Alright.
Okay. Let's change up challenges for the game.
Yeah.
Catch them a bit off guard.
So we don't get the full information of what they said there. I think there might have been more that might have got edited out. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe that is all they said. But you can hear how Nolly is a little bit of a tactical coach in between the games. He gives a bit of advice on what they should do. And I think there's actually a point where Nolly just says, just go. If you're going to go, just go. Something like that, which was really key to helping them just be confident. Okay, so this here.
Okay.
50.
I see.
Yeah, got it. Forward.
Yeah,
I have. Yeah, leave it. Faking. Shot.
Okay, I don't want to... They're about to scream in our ears. I don't want to play it. But, so this is where comms can be used creatively, right? So, comms generally give you extra information when you're going around the pitch. You let your teammates know your boost amounts, let your teammates know your positions, let your teammates know when you're going, what you're going to do, if you can't go, and so on and so on. So you get all of those added benefits of comms. But there is what I like to call creative comms, which is when you're in positions where you as a team in a call get an advantage over your opponent who aren't in your call. So in Rocket League, we telegraph stuff all the time with our car. It's car language, right? When you go for the ball, you make a very clear, obvious decision as to what you're going to do, and your opponent's going to try and read that based off of what you're doing, right? They might also try and read it based off of where your teammates are, and so on and so on. Now, situations like this, where you can see... So Nolly and Chronic, while this is going on, communicate for Chronic to fake it. Chronic calls he's going to fake it, so Nolly gets an advantage over Astra and Rise, who right now, Astra and Rise, and I think, yeah, just Astra and Rise are going to be trying to read what Chronic does here, right? They're going to be watching Chronic going, what's Chronic going to do here? What's Chronic going to do here? Where Nolly can literally drive up to this with the assumption that Chronic's going to do absolutely nothing. So he can aggressively push in on that ball and score it. So this is where you can use creative comms to give yourself an advantage in situations where the opponents wouldn't know what's going on. Another great example of that will be the final goal. You know, like in a situation...
You got it.
Nice.
I can't drop this. Rise half. I got left.
You hear that? Left. So that's an advantage. You can see the way Chronic drove up to that ball. It looked like he was going to hit it off to the right. You know, like if we...
You got it.
I'll pause it at the moment. You see, at this moment here, it looked like Chronic's going to drive into this ball, hit it off into this corner, try and take control of it to go that way, maybe go for a double off that corner. Maybe you'll be able to send it off this way. But ultimately, his car language is suggesting he's going to hit it off to the right. But you hear the comms between him and Jack call left. And this is, from Astral's point of view, this is an unlikely place for him to hit it, because Jack is in his blind spot and so on and so on, right? So when we then watch it, you see that ball goes up, that gives Jack the advantage. No one's able to beat Jack to this ball because Jack gets the creative comms advantage.
Over.
Jack calls over him, making it very clear he's going to hit it high. So they get the creative comms there. You. Chronic makes it very clear he's not going for this. So that means Nolly knows he can go. Nolly calls left, makes it very clear that he's not going to shoot. So that makes it clear to Jack to be ready for this.
No, free shot.
I mean, Chronic did call no free shot, so sometimes comms can be confusing and stuff like that. But again, that's just Nolly's decision is the more important one. And then Jack gets the shot. So you can see how you can use comms creatively. Now, this is where comms can often negatively affect you, because if you try and be too creative with comms, sometimes you actually make mistakes because you're trying to force yourself to do things that comms say to do, when actually you should just play freely a bit more. But this is where you can use comms in a way that gives you an advantage over your opponents. So in summary, we've got all sorts of different communication methods. We've got off-the-ball comms, which are probably the most important ones. Communicating to your teammate off the ball to give them information like boost amounts, where you are, whether they've got time, whether like what they're going to do, and so on and so on. what the opponent's going to do, etc., and whether they're behind their teammates. Letting your teammate know you're behind them is so good to allow them to do what they need to do. Then you've also got on-the-ball comms, which is things like I got it, calling stuff like I can't get it, leaving, faking, bumping, going for boost, when you could have been going for the ball, those kind of things. So cancelling an on-the-ball decision to go for an off-the-ball decision. And then also, if you're doing something with the ball that's less likely to be the case, what you're going to do, calling it so your teammates know. So for example, hitting it into the ceiling, hitting it left, hitting it right, soft touch, hard touch, to the corner, whatever it is, giving your teammates the best advantage when going for the ball by telling them where you're planning to hit it if it's unorthodox. Then you've also got creative comms, which is what we saw there with the decisions, which are not the likely decision you'd do in that situation, but are decided by use of comms. And the most common thing we're seeing now is people calling faking it in situations where it'd be blatantly obvious for them to hit the ball. Instead, they do something unorthodox to get out of the way of the ball, maybe even fake it and go for a bump to let their teammates go for it. And so faking the ball has become a big comm. And then the other creative comm would be, calling passes, calling unorthodox touches, that kind of thing that we spoke about before. And then the other thing was about energy. Being able to utilize your energy when communicating to be able to not only boost the energy of your teammates, especially if they're feeling nervous, if they're not feeling so good, or to try and get the hype in the team, to try and keep the rhythm of your comms at that set speed so that you don't falter and change it so that it starts to affect the team's general flow. But sometimes comms can negatively affect you. So GenG, you have to be careful of over communicating in some situations. But I think what they've done really well as a team is they've got good at ignoring comms when they don't think it's relevant. Whereas what I said before is sometimes teams can focus too hard on following their comms that they will then let themselves down. And actually, if you look back at GenG and some of their bad performances in regionals, they overpass, they overforce plays, they overdo that kind of thing. So maybe that's what bad comms looks like for them, where they try and force plays a little bit too much. So something to think about. If you guys want to work on your comms, I think modeling off of what GenG are doing is a great approach. Be aware that communicating at this speed is not realistic to start off with. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of practice. But what GenG have shown here through their comms video is that Rocket League comms is key, and that if you want to perform at the top level, you need to be able to communicate at an elite level. So fair play to GenG. Shout out to the YouTube channel for sharing this, as I think this is going to be a great resource for the future of Rocket League.